All right, so hello everybody once again, and welcome to the Penn State College of Medicine Navigating Primary Immunodeficiency Community Health Partner Echo Series. We're thrilled that you all could be here for our final session in this series, and we're so grateful to our partners in bringing you this series, the Immune Deficiency Foundation. My name is Melissa. I'm with the Project Echo team. Before I get to our regular announcements, I'll quickly ask my partner to introduce herself. Jessie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessie. I'm an education program coordinator with Project Echo at Penn State, and I'll be helping out with the attendance today.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go through our announcements fairly quickly. We do ask that you stay muted unless you're speaking. Closed captioning is enabled if you would like to use that. We would love to see your smiling face. If you would please turn your video on if you're able to for the entire session. Please remember that no protected health information is allowed to be shared. We are recording these sessions and they will be made available to you as well as all other materials. Our partners at the Immune Deficiency Foundation have a wonderful website. I put that into the chat. If you've not yet checked it out, or even if you have, there's so much there, so much information and resources. I strongly encourage you to take a look at that again. In the spirit of Echo's all teach, all learn education model, we will be on first name only basis. But most importantly, everyone is here to learn from everyone else. We have a few people we've not been able to identify, so please look for a direct message from Jessie in the chat and respond to her with your contact information. One new announcement, since this is, very sadly, our last session, you will receive the usual evaluation for this particular session, but you'll also get a series evaluation. And we really encourage you to take just a moment to complete this and give us your feedback on the series as a whole. We're going to begin today with a story from Laurel, if she's here. I'm not seeing her, Jessie, are you? Okay. Laurel was a participant who was going to share a story, but she had a family emergency, and so I don't believe she was able to make it. We do have two wonderful stories, as well as a flash talk by two of our panelists. So today's topic is living your best life with PI, and that will be presented by two of our panelists, who I'm sure you know by now, Diana and Ken, and they'll also be sharing their own stories. Let's move on to some introductions. Diana and Ken said I can skip them since they'll be sharing their story, but I'd like the other panelists to introduce themselves. Paula, do you want to get us started?
Of course. I'm Paula Anau. I'm a physician that takes care of patients with immunodeficiencies at Hershey Medical Center in Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Thanks so much. Alyssa?
Hi, everyone. My name is Alyssa Kramer. I'm the Senior Director of Education and Community Services at the Immune Deficiency Foundation, and I am happy to be here.
Thank you. And Colleen? Oh, Colleen, you're muted.
Okay. So hello, everyone. I'm Colleen Brock. I'm a registered nurse and the manager of medical programs at the Immune Deficiency Foundation. I also have two children with primary immune deficiency, and I also have it myself, and happy to be here.
Thank you. Megan?
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Messick, and I'm the Director of Education at the Immune Deficiency Foundation. We're so happy that you guys could join us on this final session.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen for everybody. There are disclosures. I sent you Laurel's experience and challenges. We're going to skip over that for now, and we'll begin with Ken and Diana. So whenever you're ready, Ken and Diana.
Thank you. Well, this talk is entitled Living Your Best Life with PI. I'm Ken Bass. I'm a patient with common variable immunodeficiency, and I serve with the Immune Deficiency Foundation as a Get Connected group leader to support people with PI in Texas. Diana?
And my name is Diana, and I am the mother of a child with PI.
Today, we want to address the issues that go on when someone is diagnosed with a primary immune deficiency. And the first thing we want to talk about is the resources and tools for their journey. Then we'll move on to the importance of developing a new perspective for life, the adjustments to medical care and expectations, and the new wisdom that you have to come up with for daily living, as well as reasons to develop a support system. So let's first talk about those resources. Next slide. We talk a lot about the Immune Deficiency Foundation. The best resource is a support group. You need to have it where you can relate to people who know what you're going through. IDF sets up their groups by state, by region, by age, by special diagnosis. And Diane's involved in another one.
It's important to communicate your needs with your healthcare providers, and don't be afraid to ask questions if you don't know something. Especially even if you are in the medical field, this is such a small part of it, and it being in that medical field, that it's important to ask questions all the time. Even from this series, I have learned so much from being a participant. It's important to have a plan of action prior to needing urgent care. Part of that is, you know, planning ahead, vacations, where you're going, is urgent cares open? What hospital would you feel best to attend? But also having a good plan of action with your own immunologist, your own primary care doctors. Hey, can I get a prescription for an antibiotic before I leave out of the country? And have a good plan in place. Connecting with manufacturers about your medication is another big one. Depending on what kind of IgG therapy you may have, they have all sorts of programs, and all of them I have seen have some kind of program, whether it's copay assistance or, you know, welcome kits for your kids. My kids got welcome bears and, you know, whatnot, and supplies so they could practice getting an infusion before. Penn?
Yeah, and insurance and billing can be confusing. One of the things I found was using a patient advocate from an insurance company can really help. They help get connected with doctors and hospitals and insurance companies and specialty pharmacies and kind of sort things out. And in my case, it was one of those times where the insurance company tried to bill me twice for the product because I ended up having to go into the hospital being sick and getting the product in the hospital and not at the home. And so they helped me figure that out and got it where I only had to pay for the product once, which was a good thing. The goal of activating all your resources is so that you can live your best life. Next slide. I've always loved Tim McGraw's song, Live Like You Were Dying. In his song, it doesn't mean that you're going to give up on life. Rather, it means that you need to find the things that make life meaningful. We need to find the activities, the hobbies, and the interests and adventures even that make us feel like we are alive. We talk to our doctor and come up with something that you both agree on that would be good for you and where you are in life. Dinah?
My son uses the motto YOLO, and then I should say he is 11 years old now, but we'll get into his story later. But being that for the majority of his life so far, he had been unable to do a lot of things. When he started finally getting treatment and feeling better, he said, Mom, YOLO. And, you know, that's taken him to, you know, zip lining through Niagara Falls and jumping off cliffs in Arkansas. The kid is a very timid kid, but he has said, I don't know if I'm going to get this opportunity again, and I'm going to do it. And that is his motto, not necessarily mine, that he lives by, and he chooses to do, you know, a few crazy things, and you just got to let him. And that brings me to make every day a celebration. As a parent, it was very important to me. I'm sorry, I have a cat that's all up in my business. It was very important for me to make every doctor's appointment, every lab draw, everything that we had to do that would be terrible or boring or not pleasant into a celebration. It was as simple as going to the cafeteria at the hospital and getting the popcorn that he liked. It was as simple as, you know, every time we go into the city, we're close to Chicago and that's where specialists are, we make it into a huge museum day. Those celebrations are what is remembered, not the blood draws, not the hour doctor appointment, not worrying about life and how unfair it is. It's about celebrating that we have this day, and if we feel well enough this day, we are doing what we can. Penn?
We also need to know that PI is a reason to live differently, not to stop living. Yeah, we have to live differently. We avoid sickness and sick people in sick areas. We're apt to wear masks. We have learned to wash our hands before COVID ever came. And we also have hand sanitizer with us at all times. And as somebody who is older, I can tell you that you also have to learn how to manage all of what we have talked about in this series as comorbidities, but all those other health conditions that go on top of this diagnosis of PI. And we have to learn how all of those conditions affect us. The autoimmune conditions that have been talked about in this series, I really liked, because that's something I've had to live with, is how do you adjust life to that? But again, the goal is to say, you don't stop living, you just learn to live a little differently. Diana?
And having an immune disorder is something you have, not who you are. And I know this comes a bit from Colleen, and that was your children's motto, and something you instilled in them, which is something that is so important. It is, while we have so many identities in this world, you know, you could be a mother, a nurse, what you do for your profession, everything, but you are not your disease. It is not going to define you. Sure, there may be limitations on some things and adaptations you may have to make, but it is not who you are. There's so much that life has to offer, and rolling with the punches and just keep on trucking is what we do with it.
And that moves us to our next slide that covers what we have to do and think to stay positive. Next slide there, Melissa. There we go. Chronic illness certainly affects life. It affects you by giving you things like fear, fatigue, depression, uncertainty, being overwhelmed, and even guilt. They're just some of the challenges that parents and caregivers and the patients can experience. These new feelings can make us feel lost, and they can make it feel like somebody put you in a different world with different rules. And that's why, again, support groups are so valuable, because you get to meet with people who get it. They can offer suggestions to help you cope with life and help you see down the road so that you don't end up just feeling trapped. And you're not your illness. You still have life. You can contribute to life. And I always tell people, you can invest in life because you still have a future to build. Diana?
Understand that this is a journey, and one rough minute or day does not mean the rough times have to continue. Making the best of what you have, and all those feelings are valid. The hard times are valid, because sometimes they are hard. But knowing that this is part of a journey, and continue and keep moving on. It's also important to stay positive, to allow the patient or caretakers to voice their concerns and worries without always needing a solution. A lot of times that's what I have found with the Get Connected groups with IDF is, I don't need a solution. There might not be a solution, and I don't need to have that solved for me, but venting and being allowed to express those feelings are just as important as finding out how to deal with them.
That's so true. Next, we'd like to leave you with some words of wisdom that come from us and other people who have PI. And the first one would be that IG therapy does work. With IG treatment, you start a process that leads you back to healthier living, but it takes time, as we just heard from Diana, to determine the best dosage, the frequency rate, what type of infusion is best for you, sub-Q or IVIG. But when you stay on the path, the most important thing is that you reduce infections and you get more connected with life. I've heard us say it before, but get connected groups are valuable. The IDF community becomes like your family. They help you adjust to your new normals, and they also provide a safe place to express your fears, your challenges, and your successes. And life does not stop with diagnosis. PI is not a death sentence, although I was pretty sure I thought I was going to die when I got diagnosed. It's a ladder. It's a ladder that you climb to a new way of living. If you climb the ladder, you'll discover that life can still be lived, but it's in a different way. Diana?
And record keeping is important. And I'll get to that in number 5 here, but record keeping is so important. If you're starting this journey, you may think something may be wrong with one of your patients, your clients. I know we're talking to, school nurses and stuff. If something is just not setting well with you, record keeping is important. Figuring out when these infections started is important. What were the symptoms of infection? Diagnosis and treatment are not always a quick process, and it may be years of testing and treatments to get where things feel manageable. I am going to quote this from the IDF website, and patients average 9 to 15 years from symptom onset to diagnosis. We were very lucky that, my son got a diagnosis, and I'll tell you his diagnosis here, story soon, but 9 to 15 years of unknown and going through the medical community seeking, asking, practically begging for answers is a long time. It's very, very hard to face for yourself and for your loved ones. But it is not an easy process. And even when you get the first labs that come back abnormal, there's testing and such that go into that. Challenges to find an immunologist, challenges to find a doctor that, may believe that there's something actually wrong there. So once again, it sounds like a broken record, but you just got to keep on trucking with going forward with what you're trying to accomplish and getting treatment and a diagnosis for yourself.
Thanks for letting us share with you, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Ken and Diana, for that talk. Before we move to the stories, which I think are so important and have been such an important part of this entire series, I just want to ask if any participants would like to ask any questions about the talk. Any questions for Ken or Diana?
Yes.
Go ahead, Jane.
Hi, this is my first session I've been able to attend, which is quite lovely because I'm recovering from my plasma. I'm bringing up something that came up for me. I'm a psychotherapist, and I've been in private practice for over 30 years, and I see a lot of chronic and terminal illness folks. And I think that one of the things that is frustrating for many of my clients, as well as many people that are faced with CVID, is some people don't feel comfortable with groups and support groups and really prefer one-on-one therapy. And when I got diagnosed, I contacted Foundation to offer mental health care to folks. And nothing ever came of that. And it makes me really sad because I think it can be really helpful for a lot of folks to find a therapist that understands what life can be like and what the challenges are, and then how to really live a productive, healthy, happy life. Because like you both said, really it's learning how to cope with the challenges we're faced with in a really loving, compassionate way and helping each other learn different techniques like meditation and all kinds of breathing techniques to deal with the stressors. So I just wondered if they're starting to get a hold of therapists throughout the country that would be willing to see people that are dealing with chronic and terminal illnesses. And I'm sad to say that that has not been something that I've seen available as a listing of, this person is licensed in Ohio. This person's licensed in New York. You might want to check them out. And it's not like you're authorizing that we're the only ones, but we're there,
Right.
So that would be something I really want to.
Thank you, Jane, for that. You're right. Not everybody is comfortable in a group, for sure. Colleen, did you want to chime in?
Yes. So that is a very good point. There are probably more people than we realize that are not comfortable in a group setting. They might be comfortable attending and listening, but they are not comfortable sharing their story. And that's perfectly fine and perfectly understandable. At the Immune Deficiency Foundation, we do have one-on-one peer support. So you can write into Ask IDF on the website and ask for peer support. We try to match up as closely as we can what diagnosis you have with somebody else with the same diagnosis, somewhere in the same age range. If you're a mother, then maybe another mother, that kind of thing, whatever it is you're looking for and asking for. The other thing that we have is the Find a Clinician resource that is a free resource where you can put in your zip code and what will come up are a variety of clinicians. It originally started with just immunologists, and we are growing it to include everybody. So every clinician. The two things that I look for when I'm entering, because I do most of the entering of clinicians into the database or begging clinicians to get involved, is they don't have to be an immunology expert, but the willingness to learn about primary immunodeficiencies. And then also working together with the patient, understanding that what we need is probably going to be different than their typical patient load. So there are resources at IDF. I am very sorry that happened to you. But we do have that peer support, which is different from the Get Connected groups. And we are including mental health specialists in the Finder. The one thing that we do at IDF, though, that we make it a solid rule is to remain, and I'm going to draw a blank on the word, neutral. So because everybody connects with people differently, we put the information in there, what their board certifications are, what they do, where they're located. You will find all that information, but it is up to the person to connect with that individual. As you probably well know, you may go see a therapist and connect right away. You may see a therapist that you don't quite connect with and you would like to see somebody else. So I encourage you to try the next person and kind of find that clinician, therapist, whomever that will work together with you and with your team to make you well and able to live your best life. I hope that helps answer. And again, I'm sorry that you faced that.
I'd like to say thank you to Jane, though, for the work she's done with people with chronic illness, because I know in our groups, you hear, we all have to talk about the other doctors we see and stuff like that. And that it is a important area to be able to say, I found somebody that, can work with me through some of these difficult issues with chronic illness. So thank you, Jane, for the work that you do. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. And Colleen, no need to apologize. I think it's great that you're starting to have people listed, because that was one of the challenges when I was diagnosed. I want to offer it to people, but there was no place to offer it. And like I said, I see a lot of folks with chronic and terminal illnesses. And I think there's so many resources that we would not get in a group that we might get individually with the therapy, and not peer to peer as well. But thank you for your time. I appreciate it. You have a lovely day. Stay well.
Thank you all. I'm going to move on to Sandra, who's patiently waiting. Go ahead, Sandra.
Hi, my apologies for having my screen off,
No
but
problem.
listening to all of this and for the past 4 weeks, I have learned so much. And I would like to also share with what my unique experiences is with this in relation to what Ken was stating, was that I wanted to take a moment, to talk about the incredible, impactful work that I do as a hairstylist, as someone to not just only, make others feel beautiful externally. We also have a privilege of serving individuals who may be struggling with hair loss due to primary immunodeficiencies as well. So our role pretty much goes beyond just hairstyling. It's about being there for those who maybe have, a self-conscious or are vulnerable to the need of support. So by creating a welcoming space and providing customized solutions, we can make a profound difference in their lives. So, it's just basically about helping regain someone's confidence and making them feel comfortable in their own skin.
Absolutely. Lots of support can come from lots of different places. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate that. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to go back to our stories and ask Ken and Diana to share their stories. And then at the end, I'm hoping we have some more time for your comments and thoughts about the session. So let me share my screen again. 1 second.
Can we do Diana's first?
We're going to do Diana's first. Okay.
That's
Sorry.
right.
Sorry. Let me flip back here. I'm going to stop sharing just so I don't spoil all
the pictures. They're all in there.
Diana shared. I love them. Okay, Diana, whenever you're ready.
Okay, so Emmett's story, I preface this by saying I knew something was different by the time he was 4 months old. I had an older child at the time who was 8, and I knew that something was different, but I didn't know what. He had his first surgery by the time he was 7 months. He was rushed into ENT 3 days before his surgery, and I said, I think he has sleep apnea, something's not right. And he was rushed to surgery 3 days later to have his adenoids removed. At that time, he has had so many ear infections, but they didn't have time to test his hearing, that he was essentially deaf. By the time he was 12 months old, in the second picture, he got another surgery to get ear tubes in, because I kept on persisting that I don't think he can hear. They did do hearing tests and such at that time, and found he had a mass on his eustationary tube and needed ear tubes. You could go to the next slide, Melissa. I'm reading off the screen here. So knowing that starting at 4 months, he had so many infections: ear infections, sinus infection, lung infections, skin infections. He even had warts, which is another complication that just would not go away. He started with hospitalizations by the time he was 3 for seizures that were unrelated, infections, complications from some of the other surgeries that he had since had. At 3 years old, he had his palatine tonsils removed. He persisted that year after getting his palatine tonsils removed, he had strep throat 13 times. By the time he was 5 years old, they had to take out a lingual tonsil, which nobody ever really hears of these when they say tonsils are removed. He had a lingual tonsil that had to be removed because it was so diseased that essentially he just had strep constantly and they couldn't get rid of it. And this goes into his diagnosis journey. He was in school. He was in regular school. And when he was 5 years old, after that lingual tonsillectomy, he ended up having to need a blood transfusion from bleeding. He ended up vomiting blood 17 days later, in which he also has a blood clotting disorder. And I started getting the idea in my head, hey, there's something wrong with his immune system. And throughout this time, I kept on taking him to the pediatrician. It was a weekly or bi-weekly thing. We were always there. It's a big pediatrician practice with 6 or 7 doctors now. And, you know, it was 1 strep throat, 1 ear infection, 1 sinus infection, bronchitis, pneumonia. And I asked the first doctor, and I said, Doctor, could there be something wrong with his immune system? And he told me that's not how typically these children present if they do. He's just having a lot of things go wrong. And I said, okay. The next week we were in for another infection. And I asked that doctor and I said, Doctor, it was a different doctor from the first one that I asked. And he also said, I don't think that's it. And I was like, okay, well, who am I? Right? I'm just his mom. And the third doctor, about 2 weeks later, I asked her, I said, Doctor, could there possibly be something wrong with his immune system? And she looked at me and she sat down and she goes, I don't think so. However, I never go against a mother's intuition. And I said, cool, you're sending him for lab work. Can we, you know, I don't know what to test for. What would you test for? And so he ended up getting, I believe, 11 vials of blood drawn that day. And she called me 3 days later and she goes, Diana, there is something wrong. And she goes, and I don't know what to do with this. And I said, okay. I was like, she's like, there's something wrong. He did have low IgG and low IgA. His titers that she drew came back in the non-responsive range. And she said, we need to get you in contact with an immunologist. And that's where our journey essentially started when he was about 5 years old. It was 3 years later, at the age of 8, that he started to get the IG therapy. Those 3 years were a long 3 years of testing, finding immunologists. He had other seizures in there. He had other surgeries in there. And no one was quick to say he needs IG therapy. He essentially became bedbound and in a wheelchair as the fatigue was so severe that he could not muster the strength to even walk to the bathroom some days. I was told it was behavioral, you know, that we were coddling him. And it wasn't taken seriously until I begged the immunologist, can we start IgG therapy? And he finally, after looking at him for 3 years, agreed. You could go to the next slide. And these are pictures of, I didn't know what I was doing. This is before COVID. He's wearing a mask. I don't know why he chose to wear gloves, but he did. He was in a wheelchair I borrowed from my my husband's grandmother because he couldn't walk. And I still wanted to take him to do fun things. The first one, that's my oldest son, pushing him. And that second one, we went to the planetarium, which was a big passion of his. And that third one was him almost every single day. And when they tell you about fatigue, I never, and this is why I knew it wasn't behavioral, he would lay in bed and literally stare at the wall. He had an Xbox that we tried to put in his room. We had a TV we put in his room. We bought video games and absolutely anything a young child would love to have. And that was what he literally did almost all day, every day, was just either stare at the wall or stare out a window. And that was it. You could go along to the next slide, Melissa, please. He always put on a brave face. I think the one in the hospital, I forget, there was so many hospitalizations. I don't even remember which one that was, but he would put on a brave face. And the day that we got to start his IgG therapy, we all wore zebra shirts, and it was a celebration. Did I know if it was going to 100% fix his fatigue or his pain and whatnot? Absolutely not. And this is him playing Xbox in our pull-out couch in our living room, getting his first treatment. He had to wear a mask because we had a nurse with us that first time. And I'll have you go to the next slide because I forget what's the next one. Anyway, so after that, that IgG therapy, we didn't mention much, but a week and a half after he started, he looked at me and the most wonderful words came out of his mouth. He said, "Mama, my legs don't hurt." And I said, "What?" And he didn't ride his bike for 2 years prior. He started going outside. He, now these weren't like big feats. He didn't like even walk around the block, but he was upright and walking and moving. And to this day, those wheelchairs, we had 2 wheelchairs, are up in our attic, and we have not had to bring them out since. During all this time, COVID hit, and we had taken on a new role. Our primary doctor suggested that we homeschool. We found out that we as in they love it. I'm still on the fence on whether I love it. Homeschooling kids is hard. I ended up resigning from my job right before COVID when he was so sick to get him diagnosed. But we celebrate going out for ice cream. We ended up buying an RV to travel and to be able to do the things that we have always wanted to do that we couldn't do. And it's a way different lifestyle than I ever thought imaginable. Here's a picture of my 2 youngest in Florida. Ironically, the day after that, we all came down with COVID, but we were living our best lives in Florida, in an RV, thinking we were being the safest we could. But go ahead to the next slide. Melissa, I forget which pictures I have. Here's a picture of him, and this is his "You Only Live Once." We drove down to Arkansas with friends, and here is him. He's like, "Mom, I'm going to jump off of that cliff." And I was like, my mom heart said, "No, absolutely not." And he goes, "Mom, I am." And I said, "Okay," thinking he would chicken out. He just jumped. This is him getting an infusion, and this is part of the plan ahead. This is him getting an infusion in our RV on the beach in Florida. And then there's all of us. Niagara Falls, we were able to go there. All these things that we had not, I had always protected and kept them into a bubble, but realizing with treatment and with the right resources, with the right doctors, with the right mindset, we can still try to be safe and live a full life. And I think that's it on me. I don't remember. Yes. I was like, I don't remember all the pictures I put, but yeah, we are just so thankful. I wouldn't change. I think obviously I wish he did not have his diagnosis is CVID, but it's been a hard journey so far, but it has made us appreciate the good times that we have, and take every day as we can to make it enjoyable. And even the rough days, you know what, if he likes Star Trek, if it's Star Trek marathon, then you know that's what it is. Ken.
All right.
Thank you so much, Diana. Go ahead, Ken.
Well, my story represents a population of people who get diagnosed later in life. I spent the first 4 decades of my life with constant sinus infections and being sick from that. But as a teen, I was athletic and I had a lot of stamina, which meant that I pushed through. I didn't feel well, but I could push through. And I compare that to now where I've learned to manage fatigue, but we pushed through. At 17, I had my first lung infection. It was a 3-month infection that ended up with them deciding they needed to take the tonsils and adenoids out. And I remember going back to the doctor 3 times because they couldn't get the infection out of my body in order to do the surgery. And when they sent me in, it was still a little inflamed and stuff, but they did it anyway. And then I stayed in the hospital for 9 days trying to get the infection to leave my body. Through college and through my 30s, I just lived with constant congestion and infections in my sinuses. And again, the goal was always to say, how can I live through it? Next slide. In my 40s, I had multiple kinds of infections. And also one of the treatments, and you got to remember back in 70s, 80s, early 90s, it was off the radar for doctors to be thinking anything PI. So as much as I'd like to say, why didn't they diagnose me then? It wasn't on the radar. And so one of the things they would do, though, is say, well, you didn't respond to that antibiotic. Let's do this one and let's do this one. And of course, do them longer term and things like that. One of the infections that I had in my sinuses, it actually went through my skull right above my eye and created a goose egg right above my eye there. And when they looked at it, they said, that's just the infectious material coming through your skull. So sinus infections are real and they are scary. When they finally decided that something should be done, they sent me to an ENT. And the ENT discovered that 6 of the 8 sinuses, the lower 6, had been what they called scarred closed, that it sat there so long that it got hard and had literally blocked off the sinuses so that I was only using the 2 large sinuses up above your eyes. They considered that to probably just be a problem with allergies. But then later I also came down with a cochlea infection, which led to hearing loss. And again, everybody was thinking, well, what else could be going wrong? We must be using the wrong antibiotics. I did all of the testing for, are you allergic to anything? And it looked like I was allergic to everything. So it was just learn to deal with your infections, some of them ending me up in emergency rooms, but I was dealing with infections. In 2004, I moved to Oregon. The infections continued and actually got worse. There are a lot of things up there to aggravate your sinuses. And in 2006, I felt like I was dying. In that year preceding my diagnosis, I had 5 weeks where I didn't have an infection. And with that infection, I was feeling that extreme fatigue. And honestly, when I went to the doctor, I thought they were going to tell me I was dying. I knew that if it kept on, I wouldn't be able to work. The doctor looked at me and said, you've had too many infections. We need to test you. And so they did the test. And of course, I was diagnosed with common variable immunodeficiency. And they told me that I had to have infusions. At that time, the sub-Q was just getting started, so everybody was thinking it was still should be the IVIG. And I was not crazy about having a needle go into my arm. And so I said, I'm not sure I should do that. What are my other options? And she said, well, you can keep getting these infections and die. And I said, okay, well, tell me more about IVIG then. So got to do my first infusion and did it at a hospital infusion center and had a negative reaction to it. Everything from heart pounding to pulse racing, blood pressure going up, headache, everything. And so I ended up in the hospital for my first infusion, and it was, you work things out after that, right? But what happened is, after, much like Diana described, after that first infusion even, I realized something different was going on in my body, and that I suddenly had more energy, that I didn't feel like I was just dragging myself through the house. So I was able to work another 10 years before I finally had to leave work at 62. So, and now I get to work part-time, and I'm a bookkeeper. I think one of the things that I had to learn is fatigue is real but manageable. I had to put away that young part of me that thought you can just push through things. You really do have to stop. There's that sense where sometimes fatigue is hitting so hard that you feel like every day is just going to be this active war of just trying to, a battle of getting through. And when you try to push through and you shouldn't, you find out that your body's taken hostage and you are wiped out for the rest of the day, and sometimes for a few days. So learning to listen to my body when it's tired was one of the things that I needed to do. It's the kind, fatigue is not something you can take a nap and have it go away. Sometimes it also includes things like aching. I've also had to learn to manage, as I mentioned earlier in our flash talk, the other things that go on, the autoimmune issues, or things going on my joints. They're falling apart. And so you learn to manage that kind of stuff. But one of the things for me is, like, when you say what's most important, spending time with family is, go ahead to the next slide. The first picture there on the left was my wife and I with our granddaughter during COVID. And that those are simple things you can do where you take time to do something simple that you will enjoy. Got a friend who crochets fidget toys for kids. And what can you do that you love, that other people, that connects you with other people, I think is important. Recently, my wife and I got to go with our daughter and son-in-law and their 2 kids to Disney World and hang out with them. And that was great, except for everybody knew that when Grandpa I call it hit the wall. Grandpa hits the wall, he's leaving the group. And but I got to do some, and that's what you learn, is to say, how can I do some? The other picture there represents IDF's Plasma Pals program, where you go and this was pre-COVID, by the way, where you go and visit people who give plasma, because the IgG therapy that we get comes from plasma, and you get to say thank you to them and tell your story. And I always enjoyed hearing their stories of, what brought them to the place where they wanted to donate plasma. But again, you manage your fatigue and you manage that sense of what's going on. I think that one of the other things that was important to me is, I always tell people, it took me almost 10 years to come to that place where we talked about what's the infusion rate, what product are you using, how are you using it, how often are you getting it, to where it really does cut down the infections. And that's really possible. And both Diana and I told the story that doesn't happen overnight. You really have to stick with it and have your doctor work with it, because as you age, whether you're a young person going to high school, to college, or adulthood, or whether you're a middle-aged person going into senior years, your body's changing and you have to be ready to change with that. And so that has been my place of saying, I have to make sure I stay connected with my doctor, keep them aware of what's going on, so that they can help me manage that. And that's my story. Key takeaways. This was from both of our stories, that everyone's journey is different and there's no need to compare. We share some things in common, but not everything. Our mental health is just as important as physical health. And finding the key between the two is key for endurance with chronic illness. You're not just dealing with the physical effects in your body. You're having to adjust to it mentally and emotionally, and learning to deal with that. And the complete picture is huge. Making every day count. Big vacations can be just as rewarding as hopscotch with our grandkids. What makes you happy as a patient, caregiver, or family member, and find what makes you happy and encourage them to focus on things they enjoy, whether it's reading or walking or painting or gaming or working or knitting or golf, sports, woodworking, photography, etc. Instead of their health. It's never too late to start a hobby. And for a lot of people, especially as they're getting older, like I am, you say, it's real easy to just say, I'm just going to be in the house, but you have to say, wait a minute, what else can you do? And we've told you many times, you're not your disease. And so create that positive mindset. And that primary immunodeficiency is a reason for living differently, but not to stop living. And I think that was the last slide. Thank you. Oh, yeah. You want to tell them about the resources? There are resources at the end that Diana and I both came up with that thought that were good things.
Thank you very much, Ken. We'll send everybody those resources as well. So we have just a few minutes left. I wanted to open it up. If anybody has any questions for Ken or Diane, comments or questions for our panelists. One last opportunity. Those lived experiences are so important. Thank you for sharing them, and thanks to you all. I know we've had other people share their journey or parts of their journey throughout this series. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you for letting us. I
appreciate it.
I find it, and anytime I get a chance to talk about Emmett and all he's been through and how tough he is, makes me proud.
It was fun for us as well to say, what are the things that we have heard other people say you have to encounter once you get this diagnosis? And rehashing that was really fun.
It's really hard-won wisdom. So I thank you for sharing that to those on all different parts of their journey, the beginning, the middle. Any questions?
Janice has got her hand up.
Oh, Janice, go right ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. Those are beautiful stories. So my question is, do you have a short paragraph or sentence that you tell people who are not familiar with your problem? Say you are going to Thanksgiving and you're seeing relatives that you have not seen before. And yeah, what do you say?
That is a great question.
I often, my son and how we explain it in a quick one sentence is, however it comes up. And I was like, this is Emmett, and he has a part of his immune system that doesn't work properly, leaving him with a very real and easy way to get bacterial infections. A common cold can turn into pneumonia for him. So we have to be careful about germs. And that's usually how I leave that, is our quick one too. I don't know about you, Ken.
I talk with guys a lot, and when you tell people that you have an immunodeficiency, they think, well, take this vitamin, take this or that. So I always tell them, I say, it's like I'm in the car and the engine's not working. So you telling me to put more gas in the tank is not going to make the car run, and that's what all of the other helps are. And I said, so what happens is, when I get the immunotherapy, that's fixing the engine, and that's why we stick with that.
I often will tell people that our immune system is broken in the manner in which we could get chickenpox every month for the rest of our lives. We're never going to become immune to it.
Yes.
And they just kind of go, oh. And so it's something they can relate to. But they think of it as you get chickenpox and you're done. And in our case, nope, you could have chickenpox now, next week, 3 weeks from now. We don't build up those antibodies. I would like to also add real quick, and Ken and Diana, your presentation was amazing. I love your words of wisdom. I think you have had so much to offer in all of these sessions, and I am eternally grateful for your input. I will say that at the foundation, we get a lot of people who say, but I can't, it's harder for them to leave the house. It's harder for them to do the things, whether it's physically due to maybe RA or some other problem that is physically inhibiting them from doing things or lessening the ability. So I don't want to paint this rosy picture too much of, you can, if you want, go over Niagara Falls. Hard pass. But if you are somebody who is more limited, there are still things that you can do to live your best life. Are you somebody who loves to read? Join a book club. Join something online where you are part of something, even though maybe you can't leave the house to attend. Maybe you can join via Zoom and be a part of that evening or that time. Getting involved again, Zoom has become one of those wonderful ways of connecting, getting involved with church groups, things that you like. I love how you said, take up a new hobby. Maybe you like painting, but you've never tried it. Maybe you take up painting or you cross stitch, or maybe you love to read and you never thought about, maybe I should try and write a book. Write a book about what your experience has been like. Write a children's book that you can give positive feedback for moving forward in life with something like this, so children aren't afraid when they're diagnosed. But photography, there are so many things that are out there that if you are limited in what you can do, I still feel like you can live your best life. You just may have to alter what that vision looks like. And so maybe you're climbing that ladder and you get so far, but maybe now you have to take the ladder beside it to go further. And so I think it's constantly thinking of ways that I'm not going to focus on what I can't do, what I used to do, and I'm sad that I can no longer do. I'm going to look for the things that I've never tried, but I wanted to do. Maybe you can become a cake baker. You have the groceries delivered to your house and you decorate and you make cookies, or, you know, the sky's the limit. It is what I want people to kind of come away with. And what you are diagnosed with, irregardless of what that diagnosis is not who you are. It is the things you love in life, your friends, your family, your hobbies, Hallmark movie channel right now, you know, but whatever it is, enjoy that and enjoy each and every moment. And I thank all of you for attending these sessions.
That's a perfect place to end. It's 1 o'clock, and I wanted to thank you all, panelists, participants throughout this journey. You're all wonderful. Best wishes to you for a wonderful holiday season and a healthy and happy 2024. Thank you, everybody, and please take care.
Peace and gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Panelists, if you would